Hi there, this is Elena with Black Sheep 303 Creative, and I am sharing a felt star garland today, which I used on my mantle. It's using the stitching die, the star stitching die that is, these stitching dies are pretty hot right now, and the one I used is the Memory Box Plush Celestial Star stitching die. And I did cut I cut stars out of white felt and gray felt. You could use whatever colors work for your scheme. Then you'll need some embroidery floss, and again, whatever colors work for you, and some ribbon. And I did wind up using that 7/8 inch ribbon on the right there, the stripy one. Now I've completed the stitching on almost all of the stars except for one. I did not do any fancy stitching whatsoever on this. So if you're looking for a fancy embroidery stitching tutorial, this is not that. I did very simple stitching. I used some metallic thread, both silver and gold, on the white star. I used red floss on both stars, and then I used white and gold on the center of the gray star. But so here's my very not fancy or very, very simple stitching, which was essentially a straight stitch all the way around. I'm sure there are people who embroider who could do some really, really cool stitches. You could probably do a blanket stitch on the outside of this to make it look really cool. But I really wanted to show like how easy it is to do this kind of thing and come up with a really cute result in just a matter of a few hours. I think this whole project took, at the very most, it took 3.5 hours probably. I don't think it took any longer than that. But part of the reason for that was because I used a very simplistic method. So if you're good with simplistic, then stick with me. So I'm just going in a straight stitch. So up through one hole, down through the next one to connect it, up through one, down through the next. The most complicated part of this is right here when you get to the point on the arm of the star. You just have to go back up through the stitching hole in the point that you've already stitched into, and then just down the other side into the next free hole. And then you just follow the same method down that side of that arm, just going up through one, down through the next. Again, it's very, very easy. You don't really need any experience. And I did use 3 strands of embroidery floss out of a 6-strand piece. So I just, peeled it apart and used half of the amount of floss in the DMC floss that I used. And then again, here's another little complicated step, which is that point where the rays come together on the star. And you just do the exact same method as you do on the point, which is, you go back up through the center star the center hole that's already been stitched in, and then proceed the opposite direction into the next adjacent open hole. And that is as hard as it gets. So anybody can do this. I think even children could probably do this, just as long as they are good with needles. Now I did that, so I finished the borders all the way around, and then my next step was to connect the sequin into the very middle. So in this die, there is a stitching hole right in the very center of the star, and then around it, there's like a circle of stitching holes. So to put the sequin on, I went through one of the circle stitching holes, through the sequin, and then down through the middle hole. So the hole that's in the very center of the die, of the felt, the piece of felt. And then I went back out to the circle around the sequin, skipped one hole and went to the next hole, and then so went up through that and then down through the middle, and then back out to the circle, skipped one, went to the next one, and went up through that and down through the middle again. And so it was just every other one to attach it on, and then just tied a knot on the back, and that was all it took. There's an odd number of holes in the center on that circle, so going every other one works perfectly. Now, this is my very down and dirty method of attaching the ribbon. So it's not pretty. Like the back is not pretty by any stretch. So we'll talk in a minute about how you can make it prettier. But I wasn't really up for that. I was just trying to get this done as quickly as I wanted to. Because I want to run the ribbon through these tabs on the back. These like felt tabs that I made. So that you can move the star is attached to the ribbon, but they're still movable. So you can move them around as needed. So how I did this was I took like basically spare pieces of felt from when I cut the stars out, and I eyeballed the size, just making sure that the shorter ends of the felt pieces overlapped close to overlapped, or at least, the top 3 stitches on each of the spokes of the radius. Now here's a way you could finish it off and make it much prettier. Like if you're going to give it as a gift or sell them, say, this is how I would do it. So you'd cut a second star, either using the die, or you could just trace the cut one and cut a star without any pattern in the middle. And then you would stitch the border, the red border, last. So that would be the last thing you do. And you would connect both pieces. So you stitch through 2 pieces of felt on the top and the bottom, but leave an opening in the middle where you would only stitch on the front. So this is how you could use some wider ribbon as well, because you could make the openings on the sides where the ribbon runs through wider if you wanted to. So just bear in mind that you would have to keep the sides stitched on the front side only using that method, and I hope that makes sense. But here's my method, which was the really simple, quick way. So I'm attaching the felt by going through both pieces of felt on the top stitch of one of the spokes in that little radial pattern, and then down through the next opening on that ray, I guess I'll say it is. Then I go to the second spoke and go up through the top on that spoke and through both layers of felt, and then down through the second hole through both layers of felt again. And then for the third stitch to connect 2 pieces of felt, I go up through the second from the top hole. You'll see that in a second. So it's not the top center, it's not the very top hole, it's the one next to it. And then you go down through the center, through both layers of felt. And so then to continue on with the pattern and finish off the spokes, I'm going to go back up through that second hole. So I'm kind of checking it there. So I'm going to go back up through the second hole. And then when I come down to connect the next stitch into the third stitching hole, I guess, I'm going to only go through the top layer of felt. So I'm only going through the star at this point. So it's just those 3 stitches on the side, on the very tops of those radial spokes, that connect that felt tab onto the star. And then I just basically went and did the same straight stitch all the way around to complete those spokes all the way around in the pattern until you get to the opposite side. And you need to leave the 3 top stitches open until you're ready to connect the second side of the felt. And then you're done. Hopefully that makes sense as well. So all you have to do now is just run the ribbon through the tabs. So I take a safety pin and connect it to the ribbon, and then run it through the tab and slide the stars down. Now, depending on how much you want, like if you're going to use it as, say, like a garland on a tree, you could probably make it a lot longer. Mine is about 8 feet long. My mantle is 5 feet long. And so I have 5 stars that are so it's about 1 every foot. And then I have like 18 inches of ribbon hanging off the ends, as you see there. If you wanted it for a tree and you wanted to go all the way around the tree, you could just keep going, just make more stars. You can also completely change up the look by changing out the ribbon. So like a solid ribbon here would look completely different than the striped ribbon, probably more formal. This is fairly casual looking just because of the stripes. You could also make these for completely different holidays. Like you could have one for a birthday party. You could easily make one for like Easter or Valentine's Day. Stars are such a universal symbol. You can really use it for any holiday, and it's super quick and really fun to make. So I hope it gave you a little inspiration today for an idea for some Christmas decor. Below are 2 more videos in my ornament and decor series that you could check out by clicking on them. And as always, there is a supply list linked below in the video description and on my blog. Happy holidays!